This week on the Stereo Image, we're lucky enough to have the great Johnny Katz in the house, entertainment reporter for everything in Las Vegas, everything. He's seen everyone for years. He knows everything about what's going on the scene. And it's so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much
Thank,
for coming on.
thanks, Jones. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm a big fan of what you do. You know that,
Well,
so
thanks.
I'm glad to be here.
I got to tell you, I've known you, well, at least 25 years.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think maybe even I met you before Penn and Teller days, but, how long have you been in Vegas? You've been here 30
I
years?
Yeah, 30 years. This past April was my 30th anniversary in Las Vegas. I moved here in
Wow.
April of 1999. The
Wow.
weekend that the Stratosphere opened was my first introduction into the city, as it turns
No
out. Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Wow.
Uh huh.
Yeah, I know when I came out here in '99 myself, I came out here in '99 and, I walked into the Mirage and I thought, "Wow, this is, this stately place must have been here for generations." And it was like 7 years old.
Uh
That was my introduction to Las Vegas architecture. But, uh
huh.
well, I try not to do this. I try to jump around a little more, but in this case, I'm just going to ask you, what brought you out here? I mean, obviously, you're from the Midwest. Tell us all a little bit about your history.
I'm from the Intermountain West. I'm from Idaho originally.
Okay.
And I moved to Las Vegas when I was living in Northern California. I was a sports writer in those days.
Okay.
I'd started my career in Chico, California, and then in Redding, California. I was working at a paper called the Redding Record Searchlight. And I moved to Las Vegas because I'd been recruited to cover the UNLV Running Rebel basketball team in at that time,
Wow.
and also some other sports that were happening. The Las Vegas Motor Speedway was opening
Mhm.
during those days. So I covered that and all other sports that were happening in Las Vegas. So boxing, golf,
Right.
some baseball, minor league baseball was going on, but primarily the Running Rebels and the Speedway. So that's what brought me to Las Vegas, and that was at the Review Journal, where I
Right.
spent my first 2+ years were at the RJ as a
Okay.
sports writer.
And before we get into your switch to entertainment stuff, you must have seen some insane like boxing matches. I mean, that stuff was huge back then.
Yeah,
Did you see any of the big fights? The like the what's his name? I don't know boxing that
Tyson,
well, but not
Mike
Tyson.
Tyson,
No, who's the
Mayweather,
Mayweather and but even before him,
Pacquiao.
who?
When I got here, Mike Tyson was fighting. I saw
Mhm.
him fight both Evander Holyfield fights. I covered
Oh
both
wow,
those. The bite night, I was
the
there
fight night,
for
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and the second fight, well, I was there for both those first two fights.
uh huh,
Plus, I covered other than those, but they were remarkable. But I was covering Oscar De La Hoya. I covered him.
hmm and
Hector Camacho fought
yep,
Julio Cesar Chavez. I covered that
right,
fight.
right,
De La Hoya and Julio Cesar Chavez in those days.
yeah,
Pernell Whitaker, I
wow,
saw fight. Those types of fighters. I'm trying to think through some of the lighter weights now. I ran Barkley.
mhm,
Yeah, but the big ones were Tyson Holyfield. Those are the big
right,
major heavyweight fights that I was.
events. They were,
Yes, they were
I mean,
events, and they were yeah, they were famous, both of
and
them.
yeah, I mean, and you were covering those as a sports reporter,
Yeah.
not for the spectacle of the glitterati that was at the big event. But, obviously, when you got here and you were covering sports, were you starting to, like, already dip your feet into the entertainment world or just going to see shows, or did you not have even time for that kinda stuff?
Well, it's interesting, Jonesy. When I There was one story that really stands out in my sports writing days. I wrote a story about the athletes who had just competed in the Atlanta Summer Olympic Games in
Okay,
1996, and
96,
they
right.
had all yeah, and there were some also who were performing in the opening and closing ceremonies, and they were in the show Mystère at Treasure Island. So I had to go to see Mystère to cover these athletes. On the
Right.
show. They just started in the show, and that was the first show, the first Cirque show I'd ever seen. It was also the first stage show I think I'd ever seen in Las Vegas. A production
Mhm.
show
Right.
was Mystère. And
Wow.
I immediately appreciated the amount of aptitude it took, not just to perform as an acrobat, but to put on the whole spectacle, the costumes, the set pieces, and everything. And that
Mhm.
story kind of ignited my interest in the scale of entertainment in Las Vegas at that time. there was a through line between sports and entertainment that I would find later, in that you're covering people trying to achieve a performance. You know what I mean? It was
Right,
like,
yeah,
a basketball team works in concert, a baseball team has certain ways in football, all these sports, boxers are athletic and acrobatic in their own way. And I
right.
was starting to see a certain, physical and passionate through line in the two cultures. So that
Mhm.
was kind of how it was, and I was very fond of doing human interest stories inside the sports community, and I got to be really good at that. And that also transferred over to arts and entertainment. So there was not, and if you can do sports, I'll tell you something about journalism. If you can do sports as a beat, if you can write sports generally,
Mhm.
you gain a lot of skills in other areas that you don't maybe realize you're gaining at the time. Beat
Right,
writing,
sure,
deadline
sure.
writing, breaking news, all that
Mhm,
stuff.
mhm. And, did you go to school for journalism? Or
No, I was living in Chico, California, which is my second hometown after Pocatello, Idaho. We moved there when I was just about 13 years old, from
okay.
Idaho to Northern California. And I was an athlete, and I was, running around and
Mhm.
doing baseball and basketball and just anything you could compete in, really.
Right.
And I became I became fond of writing. I had a skill for writing, so sports and writing were always part of my life. When I graduated from high school, I had no plan for life really. I had no real option. I had toyed with the idea of playing junior college basketball at Butte College near Chico, where I was living, but not seriously. I probably didn't have a future that way. But the editors of the community newspaper, the Chico Enterprise Record, knew my family, knew me, and their sports writers even knew me, and they knew that I had an ability to write and an interest in sports writing, and they had an opening for a part-time position on the sports staff. So I
Oh,
took it
sure. And you
at
were what, like
18,
17, 18?
18.
Wow.
This is the summer after I graduated high school, 1984. So August 1984, I started working as a sports writer in Northern California, in Chico, California, covering school sports,
Yeah, yeah.
covering the local speedway, covering rodeos that come into town, whatever they were,
Mhm.
whatever was going on, I would cover it, and I just went for it.
Yeah.
Even looking back now, and even during at the time, there wasn't a path for someone like me to be a journalist. That didn't exist. It was I created this particular avenue to become a
Mhm.
professional reporter and
Wow.
journalist.
Yeah,
So yeah, I never did go to. I never got a degree. I never went to a 4 year
yeah. Well,
school or
yeah, I
anything.
mean, you just skipped the 4 years and replaced it with actual, like, experience,
Yeah,
you know?
that's right. I mean, I'll tell you, Jonesy, I was about 20, 21 years old and into my career by then, and gaining experience and aptitude on a daily basis. And I started training students at Chico State University who were in the journalism program at Chico State, which had a very good journalism program. They had a great school newspaper and
Mhm.
sent a lot of students into the professional field. And I was training them at my age. They were older than me
Yep.
with way more education about
Mhm.
how to be a journalist at
Wow.
that age. I was like 19, 20 years old doing that, and I was teaching about deadline, how to handle it, explaining that if you miss deadline, it's going to cost the company money. We're not
Money, yeah.
being graded on this. The grade
Right, right,
is the verdict is out there in public, okay?
right.
And that was the difference between being in a real newsroom and a simulated newsroom where you're being graded. And I really remember that was a really valuable experience for me.
Wow, wow. And so you worked there from did you work there for, like, until you came to Vegas? I mean,
I
10
was in
years?
Chico at my hometown paper from 1984 to 1991, and then
Okay.
I got hired at Redding, California,
Mhm,
just north of Chico, for another 5 years as a sports writer. It was the same type of thing. I was doing a little
mhm.
bit more advanced work by then, column writing and deep feature writing. We had a really strong staff in Redding for 5 years, and through that process, I became known in the sports kind of
Right.
community, I guess, of
Yeah, sure.
journalists, as somebody who had a lot of promise. And I had friends who worked in Las Vegas on the sports staff of the Review Journal, and they
Mhm.
had this opening for a beat writer for UNLV's basketball team, which was the most important beat on the
Oh,
paper at the
sure.
time.
Yeah.
And they brought me in, and it was an interesting process because I was it was a really different period of life for me.
Mhm.
Coming into Las Vegas was very far out, but
Right.
I learned a lot in the years and 2 months that I worked as a sports writer originally at the Review Journal, there was a lot of trial and error for me in Las Vegas. And I'll just say that it was a very, very invaluable period of time for me in my life.
Eh,
And in a lot of ways, yeah.
and so then what happened? I mean,
Well, I got
after 2 years and 2 months, I'm
after two
assuming.
years and 2 months, I was I was a reckless individual personally in those days, to put it mildly,
Okay.
and they decided they didn't wanna the amount of talent and aptitude that I brought to the table wasn't outweighing the problems I was causing in my personal behavior.
Here. Oh, well, I
Yeah,
don't know if you
really,
wanna go into that
seriously.
or not, but we can suffice it to say
Oh,
that
it's just part of my life, it's part of my story, and
yeah,
then,
which is
they decided it would be a better idea for me to succeed elsewhere,
right, right.
and, which I got. So I stepped back and moved I applied and got hired at the Las Vegas Sun,
Oh, yeah,
the competing publication. And the
right.
deal was that I was gonna write, as be a feature writer, which is in the features section of the paper. It's called Accent.
Mhm.
And I was writing everything but sports at that point, and I was starting off again. I was restarting my career, and one of the things I had to do in this period of time was change the way I was living. My lifestyle had to change if I was going to survive. Period, and if I was going to survive my career. So
Right.
I did that. I became sober
Oh,
after about 2 years at the Sun,
oh,
January
good.
2001. Yeah.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
So
yeah, so I
25
haven't had a
years.
drink since then haven't had a drink on purpose since then.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
was big. That was a big period of time. So I redoubled my efforts as a journalist and as an individual and started taking my work a lot more seriously, taking myself more seriously, and then everything really kind of started moving forward fast. Then I became the arts and entertainment editor of
Mhm,
the Sun. I did that for 8 years. I ran the staff. I was not writing that much, but I was,
mhm.
organizing everybody, and we were a team that way. And I really loved that. And then in 2005, we became the Sun became the morning section of the Review
Of the
Journal,
Review
which
Journal, right,
confused a lot of people, including some of the people who worked at the Sun. So
right.
there wasn't a section for me to run. So they used me in a lot of different ways. I was writing columns, I was writing magazine stories, I was writing online a lot. I was
Mhm.
doing everything. I was writing everything. And for the next about 4 years, I was a writer at large, an editor at large. I was doing deep dive stories. I was doing notebook columns. I was
Right.
boom, 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 read and react, pitch and catch, boom, all the way
Good
all over
lord.
Las Vegas. And at that point, they saw what I was doing and they said, "We need to consolidate what Katz is doing. We need to get it into a place that is one place so people can read it all the time instead of,
Yes.
piecemealing it all out everywhere." So we started what was called the Katz Report in the
Mhm.
Sun in February of 2009, and that became what is Katz now, the column now.
Right,
And that thing took off immediately. The moment I posted my first column online, it was on. It was like
right.
direct marketing, a pyramid program. It was like Mary Kay Cosmetics.
Sure.
Your comparison, it was like all this information coming in. I was still doing a lot of magazine writing. I was still doing a lot of other writing, but the Cats report became my main vehicle for the
Right,
next 7 years. And at
right.
that point, this is where things really got interesting because I was really gaining traction as a journalist through that period. And the Review Journal started contacting me about midway through that period and asking me if I wanted to come back to the Review Journal.
Okay.
And that was when Norm Clark was still doing the 3A column.
Yep.
And they were thinking we want somebody, eventually Norm's going to want to, step down and we want somebody to be our 3A columnist. And
Mhm.
I said I wasn't interested if Norm was still writing it. I didn't want to come in and
Sure.
cause confusion. I already had a gig that I liked a lot.
Right.
And so it was kind of discussed and we agreed in principle that it would be something I would like to do, but we never got to the point where I accepted the offer. Then Norm announced that he was going to step down 2016, and immediately we started talking about it again, and
Mhm.
things moved really quickly. So in August of 016, I came back to the RJ,
Wow.
and that's the path.
Right,
That's how
and
I got to where I am now.
wow, and that's I mean, it's amazing because, I'm listening to you talk about, the strong staff that they had in Reading and all this, And I feel worried that those things don't exist anymore today for young, journalists that are trying to,
Yeah,
there's no like there's no more Lou Grant newsroom. You know what I
that's the
mean?
truth.
And I mean, there's no more sun even here in Vegas. But you've mastered I wasn't exaggerating when I said you're everywhere. I mean, you've
Yeah.
mastered the art of having information available on Instagram and on Facebook and on everything else, threads and all the social media and the print. And I see you on the new news and I see you on, you know what I mean? But it's an amazing amount of work that I mean, one of the things that I, said to Jen when we were talking about having you do this for me, I'm like, I don't even know when he's going to have time. Because you're just everywhere, and it must be I mean, I see you at VIX, I see you at every opening, everything. I mean, I can't even imagine the scheduling that you must do to know where you have to be for one particular evening. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
it's that's a really good point. I think it's a friend of mine said about this type of column years ago. He said this a man about town column and
right.
in Las Vegas is like a nymphomaniac. You everyone wants one until you have one. And
Right.
I it was a joke, but it's interesting because the biggest challenge I have is being at as many events and shows and happenings and around in the areas I want to be when I need to be there. I am but one man. I
Right,
can't
that's
do everything. But I will tell you that I have a pretty good meter about where I should be. My timing has become very good through the course of this. So, but
mhm,
the demand is higher than it's ever been because there are fewer of me.
right,
Everybody who has done this aside from me is either out of the business or has passed away,
right,
and, I'm talking about my friend Norm Clark, others
mhm,
who have done this are not in the field anymore. Robin Leach did it for a time, he passed away, did it for a long time here.
yeah,
And so the people who did it, who understand that are non-existent.
mhm,
And another challenge is not only am I covering as much as or more than I've ever covered, in the city, but there's more demand on me for people to meet with me and get to know me and generate a relationship. Like today is a very good example. I was meeting with a couple of officials from the sphere
mhm,
and it was something I have to do in my life. And those meetings tend to go really long.
right,
And they just go long if I'm involved in them. And so that happened today. I was with an official with a major league sports franchise yesterday.
mhm,
We're always talking about doing, you know, meeting up in person and talking and planning. There's more meetings in the office about me. There's more video to do. So
right.
there's a lot more to do outside of just general reporting than ever. And that is a big challenge to keep track of.
Yeah, as I said, it's mind numbing. Like, there's how many events happening every night in Vegas, and you're parceling out time to go. I can get here for a half an hour, but then if I make it over to here, I can run over and I can see Christina Aguilera over there at the Sphere. But then if I run over here, you know what I mean? It's like one thing after another. And I mean, what time do you freaking get to bed?
Well, as I say, I sleep more than you would think, but not as much as I should.
Uh huh.
But it's about 6 hours a night.
Wow.
Usually I can get by with that.
Jeez.
I'm a big fan of shows that start at 6. I'm a big fan of shows that go at 10:30. They slot in pretty well for me. And I'm a big fan of residency productions that include entertainment professionals who are patient because it takes me a while to get to all the shows,
Sure.
and do a proper job of it. I would just, yesterday I was in a meeting and was going to go and see the Conjurers, kind of a flyby over at the, composer's room, and I didn't make it. I got there about halfway through the show, so I've gotta
Mhm.
go back to that show. But,
Right.
and what took me down there was the return of Carlos Mencia to the Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club, and so that's when I was coming down for that reason, I wanted to try and catch another show, whether it was, Matt Donnelly, I know plays there. There's a lot of other
Right.
shows that are in that area, those 2 rooms, the Magician's Room and the Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club. So there's a lot of analytical kind of
Right.
strategy that goes on with these.
Yeah. Yeah. It's admirable. I mean, I'm assuming that, my relationship with you is not unlike many others, whereas you're always accessible. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the most important things. There's nothing more frustrating than if there's something to be said and you want to reach someone and they don't get back to you or they don't bother or, and I mean, you're always there. You know what I mean? You return emails, you return text messages. And unlike some younger generations that I'm finding in dealing with as I get older, I it's much appreciated, and it's why people I think are very comfortable with you and really enjoy working with you. It's because, you do that.
It is funny, Jonesy, because one thing I developed early in my career that is probably I didn't appreciate as much at the time as I do now is the fact that I learned how to do phone. I learned phone manner. I
Mhm.
learned how to address people early
Right.
in my career. We were trained on the phone when I started at the Chico Enterprise Record. I had a very good editor who became a really good friend of mine by the name of David Little, who covered me in high school. The first day I was on the job in Chico, so because when you answer the phone, say Enterprise Record, Sports, John Katsilometes, how can I help you? And I said, okay, that's kind of what am I working at a switchboard? And he goes, no, that'll make a difference for people who are calling in, even if it's a call that isn't for the sports department, it's just the general newsroom, or for something down the line, they're going to remember that you answered in a professional way. And when you're
Right.
18 years old, how professional are you going to be exactly? And so that was me as a kid. And I still, to this day, I try to, present myself as a gentleman. It comes from my family, from everybody. Even
Mhm.
if you don't like what I write, even if you don't like how I write it, even if you don't like the way I dance or the way I hold my hat or
Mhm.
whatever, at
Right.
least I'm going to be a gentleman.
Right.
At least
Right.
I'm going to be a nice person. And
Well.
that will carry you a long way. And I think that the younger generation who's coming in now, we have some terrific talent at our place really
Mhm.
good, especially on the video side, but all over the review journal was a lot more talented than my days at the Enterprise Record.
Mhm.
I would enforce and always do enforce be congenial, be
Mhm.
professional, be present, and look people in the face and tell them who you are and what you're doing because it's important. And that I don't know if that has carried through the generations as well as I would like to see, but that's what I still
Yeah, I mean, it's
want to
it's
achieve.
important. I mean, I'm a couple years older than you, well, a few years older than you, but you were taught as a young man to, have a firm handshake, look them in the eye, and tell them who you are and what to do and how to respect other people. And I don't know. I mean, I assume that fathers are still teaching that to their sons at some level, but
Somewhere you got to pick it up,
yeah,
you know.
but there's a I mean, I'm not gonna go down a thing on this, but there's an overall, um, uh, not lackadaisicalness, if that's a word, but there's an there's an overall blasé attitude towards things that I mean, somebody emails me, I email them back, within a timely period. I mean.
I know. I got a word against that too because I love the young talent we have and the skills that they bring, and I don't even know if it's necessarily generational. I will tell you about the email thing and getting back to people. When you do say to people, "If I don't get back to you in email, text me," and you mean it, it's
Right.
a lot more challenging to get back to everybody. And I have email. Sometimes it takes me a matter of days to get back to email that I started simply because the volume of
Well,
email
yeah, but
stacks
you
up.
are
So
the most I mean, you're probably got one of the highest volumes of email of anyone in the city. You know what I mean? As I said,
yeah,
how many
I would
shows
say
are
that.
running in Vegas right now? How many people are in those shows that want to have a relationship with you? How many people are, producing those? How many people work at the hotels and the casinos that want your ear to get,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And it's got to be overwhelming. And I keep going back to that, but it blows my mind that you're able to not only do it, but do it so well and
Yeah,
keep everything organized.
thank you. I think organization. It's funny because in keeping track of everything, and right now we're in a world where you really got to get page views, clicks, and a lot of what I like to do doesn't lend itself to necessarily page views and clicks on the title of the column. For
Mhm.
example, I could say, I could see an incredible artist at Vic's, or I could see an incredible artist at Myron's, and the title might be this was a great artist at Myron's, and nobody will read it because it's like, okay, what
Right.
else is new? You know, it's
Right.
in competition with so many other things. So I have to form a way to hook people in to the post that is going to create some energy, and that is
Sure.
a big challenge. That is a very big challenge, and it's a tough thing for local entertainers too to get their minds around because you're competing now in a world where a lot of the page views are people doing a video of a dessert at a restaurant or
Right.
something,
Right. Right.
which is fine, but that's not everything. And
No.
I do that too, but you gotta figure out a way to inventively get their attention.
Right. Right. And well, speaking of which, trying to garner clicks and all that, is there say you see we're just going to use Celine Dion because she's not here right now. But you see Celine Dion at the Coliseum or wherever she was,
Yeah,
and
close.
and then um, to create interest in her or that thing, will you say, Dustin Hoffman spotted at Celine Dion to bring more energy to that or more views? Does that?
We were just talking about this in house the other day about sightings. We just call them
Mhm,
sightings and how to handle them. Now, when I was writing the Cats report and I was in pretty much direct daily competition with what Norm Clark was doing,
mhm,
I knew that in that period of time, I wanted to do something completely different than what Norm was doing because he had that kind of bold face, boom, 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 all the
sure.
names everywhere. And there were times when half of his column would be sightings.
Right.
And I would stop reading at that point.
Mhm,
And I stopped reading because I know those sightings were fed to the writer by PR.
sure.
So I'm the publicist for the restaurant. I'm the publicist for Hard Rock Lucky's at the Hard Rock, the
Right.
24/7. That's a very good example. And the other night we had Andrew Dice Clay and Steve O
Right.
having
Ooh.
dinner. At okay. Now, there's a lot of that goes on in Las Vegas. There was a lot then, there's certainly more of it now.
Mhm.
And am I gonna spend my time taking that information and dropping it in? Or am I gonna spend my time doing actual,
Right.
developing coverage and things that I think are really important?
Right.
There is a sense that we could do a weekly piece that's I would call it "Who Was Where," and
Mhm.
it shows where people are spending their time. But I would have to verify it myself. I don't know if I would want PR people to keep feeding me this
Right.
information because it could become unwieldy. You
Yep.
can't really verify. We had a sighting one time of Chris Everett. It would happen to be at Lucky's. Chris
Mhm.
Everett, the tennis player
Sure.
at Lucky's, on a night when I can tell you she was doing commentary at the French Open at that very time. I said, man, I'm calling this one because Chris Everett was not at Lucky's because she was
Right.
calling the US
Right.
Open matches on TV. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, oh god, sure looked like her. Maybe
Sure.
she plays Chris Everett in the Legends show. I don't
Right.
know.
Right. Well, oh, and the
But yeah,
tennis
that
set
that
the
happens.
the tennis set at the Legend show is excellent. But, well, no, well, that's yeah, because I was curious about that because I don't see as much as that as I did 20 years ago of, guess who was scarfing muscles at, you
Right.
know, it seems to be kind of an old Walter Winchell type, or, Dorothy
Yeah.
Dorothy Kilgallen, you know, but, I you so I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because this is all such great stuff, but we're we're burning time that I wanted to ask you about my little reason for doing this, which is what kind of music do you like and what do you listen to and when did you start and when did because I mean obviously you have an incredibly wide palette. You know what I mean? I've read you gushing about a country artist and a jazz artist and I mean what formed your musical taste? I
Some
guess
people
I
say
should
I
say.
gush too much. I appreciate a lot of different types of art. Jonesy, it depends on who I'm covering at that moment, really what
Right.
I'm listening to. That I will tell you, like I went on a Black Keys jag, which I'm kind of still on, by the
Mhm.
way, when they were at the Virgin Theater, the old joint at the Hard Rock, and now it's
Yep.
the Virgin Theater at Virgin Hotels. Um, that was a very I interviewed Patrick Carney, the drummer, and had
Mhm.
a great interview. It was the second time I've talked to him, and I went to the show and we went in there, and it was just a terrific concert. And I started a deep dive on their last couple of albums,
Mhm.
especially Peaches, their last covers album, which is very good. I like that kind of grab you, hooky, take me on a
Right,
blues rock ride.
right.
That's my home court. I'm a big Beatles fan,
Mhm.
really big in the 80s when I grew up. Everything was it was a lot of Van Halen, AC/DC,
Right.
that type of music. I
So
was a
more
big
you
Queen fan, Journey,
yep.
but
So you
above all that, Rush. I'm a huge, huge
okay,
Rush fan,
right.
massive, and I'm so thrilled that they're back together. So
Yeah.
those are my go-to.
So you were never a pop music guy growing up,
I,
like you were like me, you were like rock and roll, you're AC/DC, Zeppelin,
un,
Stones, you know.
underneath that, Stones also. Boy, my girlfriend's in the Stones, the Sin City Stones show at the Horseshoe. So I've been listening to a lot of Rolling Stones lately for the first time
Okay.
in a long time. That show was a kick-ass experience. That's like
Wow.
the Stones in a club, yeah. The Stones in a club, that's what that
Mhm.
show is. So I've been listening to a
Wow.
lot of Stones lately. But I'll tell you, I'm not averse to, we'd go on these dovetails even back in the '80s. Duran Duran,
Mhm.
I'd listen to Oingo Boingo for days. Talking Heads, I saw
Right.
David Byrne at the Coliseum, which
Right.
might be the show of the year so far,
It's
which
funny,
was
I wanted to go, but
incredible.
yeah, I saw the one before that, the one that Spike Lee made the movie of,
Oh, the one at the
at the Smith Center.
At Reynolds Hall? Yeah. I
Yeah,
missed that. It was almost 10 years ago to the day, I think, or something
unbelievable.
like that.
But it was
Yeah,
it was
right?
the same idea in terms of the band moving for the entire and I was blown away. I mean,
Right. Uh-huh.
really, it really, really something new, something
Yeah.
different, and it's his mind. But yeah, I wish I had been. Unfortunately, by the time I saw that I could attend that show, the cheapest tickets were $1,400.
Oh my goodness. Well, I caught it at a time when they were over at Coachella anyway, so it was just a
Uh-huh.
one-off. But
Right.
I would enforce this, and I would put this out in the universe when Burns done with his tour, whenever that is, to talk to him about doing a sit down of 8 shows or so in the Coliseum,
Wow.
especially. And that would be
Yeah.
really special. Yeah,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you see somebody who puts that much thought into every component of the performance and takes you I didn't want the show to end.
Right.
I thought the choreography and the musicianship and the way they moved and the way he presented the songs and their different arrangements was
Mhm.
spectacular. So, consequently, I was listening to Talking Heads for a month.
Right. Right. Well,
That's
I mean,
Jonesy, I will tell you, whenever I'm writing about somebody, I get into it. Baby Keem, who's an artist that a lot of people don't know about, a big rap star out of Las Vegas who won the Grammy for best rap collaboration with Kendrick Lamar in 2022. Kendrick Lamar's his cousin.
oh
Baby
wow.
Keem is from Las Vegas, and he's on a world tour right now. And I got him to in an interview that was really great.
Mhm.
When I interviewed him before that, I had to listen to a lot of Baby Keem music and the album Casino that's out right now.
Mhm.
Explicit lyrics, hardcore, I mean, in your face. And I listened to that thing over and over and
Mhm.
gained an appreciation for that type of art. This is not a guy in a music club in a lounge playing jazz whatsoever.
Right.
He's out there presenting his point of view in a way different way. And
Right.
it's not my underpinnings. I never knew his music before he won the Grammy, but that's what I have to do. You have to get
Sure.
educated real fast on this stuff, you know?
Right. Well, you're, as they say, we're the same generation basically. So
Yeah.
it sounds like all the stuff that you listened to growing up was the stuff that I listened to. Although at the same time, I was listening to Sinatra and Fats Waller and Dave McKenna and,
I got
you
into
know,
that later, to be
right.
honest.
Yeah. Well, that was my question was like, did you come to jazz ever as as like, did somebody sit you down and say, listen to kind of blue? Or did you it just like naturally creep into your life or you started seeing some lounge shows that had jazz aspects or because you write well about jazz as well. Well, you write well about everything, but you're not a dilettante. You know what I mean? You have keen insights on the creative process with jazz musicians.
Yeah,
And
it's the latter. It wasn't until I got to Las Vegas that I appreciated that not only the jazz genre specifically, but the whole format of the jazz presentation.
mhm,
Now, I came from an era where we'll talk about the Las Vegas sensibilities, like the Joe Williams of the world,
Mhm.
and the if you want to say Rat Pack in that vein. I grew up in the era where we were listening to a lot of rock and roll and a lot of music at the time, and I was watching a lot of Saturday Night Live, and you
Mhm.
know where I'm going here. They didn't have an appreciation comically for what was going on. They were mocking that world. They were mocking Las Vegas pretty
Right.
heavily. So it was Billy Crystal as Sammy. It was Phil
Jo
Hartman
Joe
as
Piscopo is Sinatra
Joe Piscopo and Phil Hartman as
and Phil
Sinatra. The
Hartman, yeah.
Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo bit where they did Ebony and Ivory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that was probably Joe Piscopo's best moment ever.
Yeah.
And I was naturally, and I was Nick, the lounge singer that Bill Murray would do, and I would do
Right.
this. I would be that way. And the people who grew up with me in California, especially in Chico, see me now hanging out with that
Right.
community. They said, "Cats, you remember when you were in high school and you were like, you are dark and I am
Yeah,
white."
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mocking it. And I say, I've evolved. And when you cover things, whether it's Cirque du Soleil or jazz or whatever the art form is, symphonic performances, when you cover them and you start to get to educated about what it takes to put on a show like that or do what you do, what people like yourself do, and how much training goes into it, you have a completely different appreciation for it. And I'm not just talking music, I'm talking about magic, I'm talking
Sure.
about a dance,
Yeah.
all of it. And so I think what, but in terms of the jazz format and jazz appreciation, it wasn't until I got to Las Vegas and started covering the people who put on these shows, the bands, the musicians, started to turn my ear and turn my attention away. And then I started to be able to write intelligently about it, even
Mhm.
if I don't own the album, even if I don't have any appreciation for personally for what's going on. At least I have an appreciation for the amount of aptitude and training and education that goes behind it. You
Mhm.
know, I
Mhm.
love going to the Penn and Teller show early to see you guys do your thing, you and Penn. I get
Well
there early just to do that.
well, thank you.
I mean, that's part of the show,
Well,
and, I like that a lot.
it's yeah, it's I mean, I've been with them 25 years and,
Wow.
half their career. And, I love that that it's somebody. I think it may have been you that wrote, "A Penn and Teller, the only magic show with a jazz soundtrack."
Mhm. Yeah.
And, and it's I love being associated with it, and I love being. I mean, just this past year, they started taking me on tour with them for the 50th, and they like it, which is they realize that, having me is a different energy than having something on tape.
Yes.
And so I've been thrilled. I mean, I got to go to London with them, and I got to go to, we just got back from Toronto, and and it's just it's a whole new world for me because I feel like I'm really part of it, after all this time. It's fun. But
Right. I
the other thing
totally
is,
100% agree with you, and I was thrilled to see you, especially in London when we went to the Palladium
oh
shows
yeah, you were there.
and see
That's right.
yeah, see that yeah, I was there, by the way. Yeah, I was such a part of people forgot that I was actually there and not just in Las Vegas with these guys. But to what you're talking about, Jonesy, is my role in this whole conversation is to let people know that's going on, is to
Right,
draw it out to the public, because otherwise you're working kind of in a vacuum. And,
right.
you have to say, "Look, this is what live performance can add to the ticketed performance experience."
Mhm.
And, otherwise, people don't realize it. And at some point, they say, "Oh, I didn't know they had a live band," or
Right, right.
I just wrote about Clue X, a show down at Notoriety Live. It's based on the Clue movie.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's a live show, local cast and everything. Really good, really strong show. Really well
Mhm.
costumed, well performed. Well, just really rich and
Yeah.
it's in an unusual spot. But when I went to the show, they have a band.
Wow.
They have a live band.
That's
And that might have made the difference for me to write extensively about it. I said, when I saw that band, I said, this is a show that's taking itself seriously.
seriously, right.
It's putting everything out there for us. If
Mhm.
it, whatever happens, they've started at the top. And when I saw the band, I'm like, good for you guys, man.
Right.
I
Yeah,
thought it was
yeah.
great.
Well, I know when I started with Penn and Teller, you could count the number of acts in Vegas, headline acts that had live musicians in their show.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and certainly no one on the stage. I mean,
Yeah.
well, I'll never forget when I went to see Avenue Q at the Wynn years and years ago, and the band was like in a hotel room somewhere, and he brought him up on a screen, like, "Let's thank the band," and, so, but I'll tell you the other thing without going off on a tangent is, how good Penn has gotten on the bass. I mean, he is now a fine bass player, and the pandemic made it all happen, you
Yeah.
know, because Penn and his schedule,
Uh-huh.
he could never practice. So he would the only practice he was really getting was playing with me in the pre-show every day.
Right.
And during the pandemic, he started practicing an hour and a half a day every day. And he turned himself into a really good bass player. And
Amazing.
it is
Amazing.
amazing. I mean, you know, he he just he just did it. And now it's like I don't for the first few years in the show, it was obviously white knuckle time because he'd only been playing for a year. And, so I'm helping him throughout. And then, as the years went on, we both got much more comfortable with each other. But I mean, the past 5 years, he's actually fun and a joy to play with,
Yeah.
and it's such a difference. And, his sound is great, his time is great. And, and he comes up just the other day, we were playing like Sunday night, and he's playing the solo. And I thought to myself, this is a fucking competent bass solo. This is really good,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so don't tell him I said that. And he will never listen to this, but he's really turned into a really fine musician.
I don't know how he has the time to do the bass,
Right.
to do his writing.
Well, the writing, the
He's got
show, the
2
TV
books. The
show,
show is always the
yeah.
show doesn't just sit there. Their 50th
No.
anniversary was a monster. It
Yeah.
That thing would have crushed a guy half his age. And
Yeah.
he's doing that. I that's why I think Penn and Teller have been one of the most rewarding acts, and it's some of the most rewarding individuals, all you guys, in my career, because everybody's moving forward all the time.
Right.
I
And
always learn something after I talk to Penn, Teller,
well, it's just,
all the, Georgie,
yeah, yeah,
I talked to her in London for a long time.
right.
I'm
Well,
always picking up what it takes to put on a show like that.
and also, just to, um, before I forget it, but I'll tell you a quick story about Penn and his bass playing in a minute. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, what the other thing that astonishes me about them, and again, I'm not. I worked a lot with a lot of people before I was with Penn and Teller, and I worked a lot in New York, and I worked with a lot of great musicians, but I was never in quote unquote show business. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to see the amount of work that these guys do every day is it's overwhelming. It's astonishing to me. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine at this point, obviously, but I mean, Penn has 10 different things a day going on, and Teller has 10 different things a day. And then they come together at 7 o'clock and they put on this incredible show, and they're writing new material. There's two new tricks going in the show right now. You know what I mean? It's like they
Yeah.
never stop. And it's but I will, just before I forget it, is you were talking about Penn playing with me and Jeff. And I mean, he really didn't want to do that record. He didn't think that he was, he kept saying, I shouldn't be playing with you guys. And I said, we can make an album with any bass player in the world, would be happy to play with me and Jeff. We want to make it with you because you are ready to make this record. And what was really funny is I was in Chicago playing at the Green Mill, which is a real, high profile music gig, and he was gonna I talked him into sitting in on 2 songs, and he turned to me before we went up on stage, and he said, "I've never been more scared in my life.
Wow.
I'm honestly more scared than I've ever been in my life." And I said, "You're gonna do fine." And I said, we'll start out with the blues." And so he got up on stage behind Kelly Sills bass, and he turned to Eric Monska, and he turned to me and he said, I think I might throw up." And I and I said, "With," and I said, without missing a
That's
beat,
the indicator.
yeah, and
If he
I said,
retches, he's really not just talking about it.
yeah, and without missing a beat, I just said, "Well, if you do, turn toward Eric, throw up on the drummer." And
Yeah.
And that
Don't
lightened him
that's a
up.
joke. Don't throw up on a musician.
Yeah,
Is that it?
and
Yeah.
so he got through it and he played, and Kelly was there, and Kelly is a bass player that's played with Dizzy Gillespie and every jazz great there was for 50 years at the showcase. Every time a headliner came into the jazz showcase in Chicago, Kelly still was the bass player. And Kelly said to me, "Penn plays great," you know? And, I mean, he really was the fact that he did the gig with me and Jeff, and he was miserable and dour before we did it, and then he lightened up afterwards when he realized that he wasn't going to fuck it up, and we wouldn't let him fuck it up, and we wouldn't have asked him if we didn't want it, and that record's a fine record. Um, so anyhow, but that's enough about them. I mean, they get their own publicity.
Well,
I'm
it's always
interested
it's
about
an
you.
appendage, and it's the kind of thing I love covering in Las Vegas. That it's the other skills almost what people do
Right.
otherwise than what we know. His is obvious, but I know there's a lot of that out there.
And also that's a large part of why I decided to do this podcast was because David Silverman from The Simpsons, who's done my last 5 album covers, he plays the tuba and he plays in New Orleans bands. And I started thinking, I want to talk to him not about animation, but I want to talk to him about the music that he likes. And then Bill Prady, who writes The Big Bang Theory and Sheldon Fails to Save the World, which is coming out, I guess, he plays the saxophone. And I wanted to talk to him about music and not about writing sitcoms. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah,
said, there's a lot of people, and I figure you have a million stories of musicians that you've covered over the years here and stuff, but I wanted to hear about you and what kind of stuff you like to listen to and what drives you and and it just opens the door to have nice conversations with people.
yeah,
But
and I think the short answer is I grew up the way I did with the music of the day, but now it's really what's in front of me.
mhm,
You know,
mhm.
it's Bruno Mars, everything from Bruno Mars to Sinatra, and all the way around.
Right, right.
Uh-huh.
Well, you definitely, I mean, everyone says they listen to not a lot of people have very, very narrow tastes in my business. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, there was a famous story about Jake Hanna, who was one of the greatest swing drummers ever. And, you know, he was so rigid in wanting to play straight ahead swing jazz that he didn't even like playing a bossa nova. You know what I mean?
really.
He
Okay.
was, I mean, he's been dead for 30 years, but he great, he was a big influence on Jeff Hamilton. He was one of the greats. But, you get this tunnel vision, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not up on the kids' music today because a lot of it just doesn't speak to me. And I find myself going back to Sonny Rollins records that I grew up
Right.
with.
Uh-huh.
But if I hear something that's good, I don't dismiss it because it's new. That's the important thing for that I think all musicians that don't want to pigeonhole themselves, you have to say,
Right.
you have to say, okay, maybe there is something to this Taylor Swift. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
maybe there
there
is
is.
something, you
Or
know what I
or
mean?
or BTS, use that as an
Yeah,
example. I mean,
yeah,
there's a reason why those guys are selling out the way they are. It's
right,
not a fluke. And
right.
if you go and investigate them, you figure out why. I go back to a quote, a conversation I had years ago with the Carlos Santana. And at the time I was talking to him, EDC was in town,
Hmm.
and he was running his show and still is at
Yeah.
House of Blues. And I asked him about Steve Aoki or Tiesto, one of the headlining DJs
Hmm.
out there, and I said, "Do you ever consider collabing with and appearing at EDC?"
Hmm.
And I didn't know what to expect out of
Right.
Carlos Santana, Woodstock. I mean,
Sure.
and he says, in a heartbeat, he says, I would love that. He goes, I want to explore other art. He goes, the melodies that you can get in electronic music are wild. He goes, I do
Hmm.
not want to be like my old man's friends when I was growing up in the Bay Area, waving their fist at me with my electric guitar.
Right.
I don't want to be that guy. I want to know what's out there at least. And I
Right.
like that. I think the
Yeah.
DJ community, they've been around for a reason. I hate that my friends Lon Bronson, and those
Oh.
guys. Lon always says the only thing worse than a headlining DJ is a DJ opening for a DJ. And and I
Well,
say, my counter to that is okay, there's something to the DJs that you're not catching if you have that attitude.
it's a person, and I mean, I'm the same way in terms of we're people that spend our lives studying an instrument to get good at it.
Yes.
And you're taking away. I understand the DJ allure, and I understand that there is something there. It's just really, you have to get over the idea that they're they're not musicians.
They might not be.
They don't know how to pick up a guitar and play a chord, but they're making music with what they have, or they're making a vibe with what they have, and you know what I mean? And so it's a
Yeah.
different art form completely. But
Yeah,
but
I get you. Yeah, that's a very good point. I get that a lot from, the folks who are, musicians, let's face it.
right. I
They
mean,
are creating an experience that appeals to a lot of people that is
yeah,
not easily achievable anyway. Tiesto said, I'm not a classically trained musician. He told me that one time. I
right,
don't know how to play Mozart, but I know how to make sounds move
right.
and
And
move a
it's a totally
community
different thing that
completely.
has a huge appeal. And
Yeah,
but and but and as I said to some, you brought up BTS. It's like you have to remember that 60 years ago, the Beatles were BTS. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They were
hmm
music for kids by kids that the older establishment just made fun of their haircuts and didn't like them
yep,
and didn't know what they were. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
it's a real thing. And as you said, you don't get that popular and that huge on a fluke. I was at the Soundtrack Studios in New York when I worked there in the 90s. And my friend John, who's a genius, probably certifiable genius, but he ran Soundtrack, and he said, "Mike, none of these people that you're seeing, they didn't get to where they are because they don't work hard. They're all the hardest working people you've met." I mean, we were talking at the time about a guy named Heavy D. I'm sure you probably
yeah,
remember that rapper name. But I mean, these are
yep,
guys that had, four different acts working and that they're producing, and it's not that they no nobody woke up and just handed them a record deal. You know what I mean? They're all incredibly hardworking, and they want their product to be the best that it possibly can be. And
right.
so, but, well, I'm gonna say, do you have any words of wisdom for the youth of today? No? It's
Get
like
another
like these
degree.
these Instagram reels. What would you say to the kids of the future? But no, but
Do you?
yeah, I just wanna say thank you so much for doing this. It's really, really been fun, and I wanted to know a little bit more about, how you came about, because you are now a Vegas legend. I
Touch.
mean, you're so not no, no, I mean, really, I mean, you're part of what makes Vegas Vegas, and that's important. And as Penn and Teller said, when Joel Fishman first pitched Vegas to them, they thought of what we thought of as Vegas as teenagers. They thought it's
Yeah,
where you go to
I get
die,
that. Mhm.
and it's not where you go to start a 25-year career as a top
No.
headliner. And they've put lie to that, and now everyone does it. I mean, every major act in the world wants to play Vegas. And
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I tell you, one thing about those guys that's among so many other things that have resonated with me is, at some point you become the institution if you
right,
hang out long enough. I know
right,
that they've kinda resisted this, I certainly have, I never thought I'd look around and say there's nobody who is the deacon above me anymore,
right,
in terms of tenure,
right.
and when you get to that point, you're valuable in a different way, I think you
Mhm.
become more of an institutional spokesman. They certainly have the people like there's so many like Carrot Top and I've had this
Right.
conversation. It's like, what
Mhm.
happened? How did we become the graybeards? How
Right.
did we
Well,
become? What happened in our? All of a sudden we're looking around like whether it's executives or it's headliners,
mhm.
you know, PR reps, and
Yeah.
you have to take that role seriously in a place like Las Vegas because it is growing all the time, and institutional figures and institutional knowledge is important.
It really is. And a link to the past is important too. And,
Absolutely.
well, listen, I'm going to thank you again. I will say it's been an absolute honor to have you on, and we will speak again soon.
We will
And
do it anytime, Jonesy. We can set this up. I'm in.